Welcome to the Meta, season 27, end of season. The only episode I'm doing for season 21. And in the future, I will continue to do one episode per season now that we're changing to a 3-week on, 1 week off GAC routine. So, if this is your first time here, thank you for watching. It's been a while since I posted a video on this channel. Didn't do any Kyber labs during the course of this last 3v3 season. I've been working on the Grand Arena Buddy mostly, which is almost done. We're about to enter testing. Anyway, nothing to do with the show. In this show, we look at the meta, what's happening, where it's going, my opinions on it, what's going up, down, worse, bad, etc. For this particular show, I'll see how I do it moving forward, because we're going to have some sort of rotation now of 3v3 and 5v5. So I'm not exactly sure how I'll format it a little bit, because this show is partially reviewing the 3v3 data, talking about some of the teams. But because in the future, if we go from 3v3 to 5v5, I would like this show to have some, there's some interesting teams you can use. But if we're going from 3v3 to 5v5, the only thing you can really use is fleets. Anyway, I'm not sure how I'll do it yet, but just to let you know, there'll probably be some format changes. Pardon my voice as well, I'm getting over a cold, so I'm a bit stuffy. Anyway, in the background, we'll be watching Glurmit. He's a Kyber 2 player. Pretty good, pretty competitive, does some interesting fights. And entertaining to watch. Anyway, let's go back to the show. So who am I? If you haven't seen this before, I'm this guy, Kin. I'm 10 million GP. I play in the top 50, top 100, top 20 sometimes. Really just depends on how much time I have and how lucky I get, or how good my opponents are. So I watch a bunch of GAC fights, mostly for the counter tool. Almost 3,000 cataloged, sorted fights there in the Grand Arena Science Counter Tool. So pretty cool. We added a huge amount during the 3v3 season. There's so many new fights, and getting in some old ones that we didn't have also. So let's go on to the meta right now. What's going on now, like after the end of the 3v3 season? Honestly, it's sort of incredible. Like, obviously the fact that 3v3 is sort of new again for most people. You know, 3v3 had been gone for 7 months, 8 months, a long time. So it was having to be relearned by most of the participants. And there's been a huge amount of power changes as well, power level changes. Omicrons are brand new. Quite a few new characters. They fixed Gideon and Starkiller at the same time, so they could be used in 3s. Gideon is actually quite good in 3s as a leader. Not amazing, but good and surprising. The fleet changes, so a lot of new things with the format itself, besides just the fact that it is 3v3. Excuse me. I'll be drinking. Oh yeah. Check out who's the cutest in the galaxy? Well, my wife is for getting me this cup, but Grogu's pretty cute too. So, it was a crazy season. Lots of changes. Lots of new counters. People having to figure things out for the first time. Fascinating to watch, like really cool. Lots to learn. Lots to try. A dynamic maelstrom is how I thought of it when I was writing my notes. And one of the important things, or two of the important things, two of the points that I thought were very interesting with this particular season, with 3v3, is the theme sort of for this episode, is the flexibility on a player side. More so, I'm saying player side more so than roster side. Like roster side, you can have a very flexible roster in how you mod it or Just the fact that you have a lot of characters, or you build up a lot of teams as opposed to just going straight after all 6 GLs and ignoring some of the other teams. Um, there's advantages to roster flexibility. I'm not talking about roster flexibility in a negative way. Um, what I'm saying is in 3v3 especially, and this season since 3v3 hasn't been here in a while, the players, not with the rosters, but the players who demonstrated that flexibility to adjust to each opponent they were facing. And I think it's less so than even adjusting on an opponent basis, because there's not a ton of strategy in 3v3, especially in the first few weeks. I mean, maybe by week number 3 a little bit, or week number 4, you could see the history of your opponent and try and strategize a little bit. But for at least half the season, there was much less strategy and much more adjusting on the fly as you saw your opponent's teams and their board. So players who are able to do that are the ones that did the best competitively in this season. And we're going to see a lot of that as we go through and look at the different stats and the different teams and different things that were popular or not popular. Also, I just noticed it's very obvious. It's pretty dark. I'm not recording this during the daytime. So, well, anyway, you didn't come to see my pretty face. And the second theme. This is something that's maybe I've touched on a little bit, but not quite as focused as in this way. I've seen this so much in this past season, for some reason. I think because people are trying to apply the 5v5 lesson to 3v3. That doesn't work very well. Don't let perfect become the enemy of good. And what does that even mean? In 3s and 5s, well, let's go down to that point where I start talking about this. In 3s and 5s, especially in 5s, like really this comes from 5s far more than 3s. I'm saying this concept, perfect being the enemy of good, where people will try, and I think this is driven a little bit by targets that guilds set for territory wars, which very frequently just falls over into GAC. But aiming for very specific, precise thresholds. Speed, health, offense, protection, stats, more so than anything else. And some of this is popularized by content creators as well, or videos that you see. I mean, whether it's I guess anybody who makes a video is a content creator, but they'll see something, oh wow, that's cool, I really need to relic 9 this character or something like that. And they follow this guide, maybe because they like the character, or they like the content creator, or trust them, or whatever the reason is, or they're following their guild's TW focus. And in most cases, for most players, this is negatively impacting their GAC performance. What's GAC performance, before I continue on my analogies? The amount of crystals you can get back from winning. Let's just say it that way. I think if you focus on trying to get very, very specific thresholds for just certain counters that are going to work, and I think in most cases, I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit here, but in most cases, not all, but in most cases, it's better to use a different counter than forcing yourself to use a counter that relies on very precise stats. Especially because in most cases, it's only this counter is not something you can use against all team lineups. So in the end, you're investing in something that has a relatively small use window and is relatively easy for players who are good or equal or better than you, which are sort of the players that you want to try and beat, honestly. It's not hard being players who are less prepared or not as experienced as you are. You know, it's better to focus on beating players who are better. That's where the skill comes in. That's how you improve in your standings and improve your own skills, I think. So I think because of this, it negatively impacts their success in GAC, the amount of crystals they get, the amount of wins you can have. And it takes a lot of time, both like planning and researching and learning and whatever, and actual in-game resources that you could spend on other teams. So before we go on and look at some examples to illustrate this, there's a big difference between offense and defense. Defense in general, there's like two aspects to defense. One is sort of on a strategy level. If you can predict what your opponent is going to place, you can place a defense that they will have an extraordinarily difficult time, or just maybe impossible at many roster sizes, to get through it, if they keep or place certain teams. The other part of defense, either you're trying to out-strategize them, outthink them, or you're just trying to influence RNG. So make a particular counter, your character is a little bit faster, or they have a specific turn order. Turn order is something I think is always great to be cognizant about. Like, choose your turn order, don't just put some speeds on characters. Anyway, when your characters are on defense, you're either trying to outthink them or out-strategize them, or just tilt a little bit the RNG in your favor. Give your characters more stats so that instead of it being, a 55% chance to resist, it's 63% chance to resist. That's effectively what defense is. You don't have a lot of control. A good defense will be beaten by equally skilled offensive player almost all the time if they choose the right team. But on offense, again, this is like don't let good become the enemy. Don't let perfect become the enemy of good. On offense, if you were trying to tilt the odds in your favor on offense, in my opinion, you're already losing. You're making a bad choice. You do not want to take a team on offense that has like a 60% chance of success. Like, why? So when you're building your characters and setting their stats at certain levels, hoping for a very, or trying to get a very specific counter set up and running, if this is for defense, okay. You want to gain 5% more chance of a hold or something like that. Great. I mean, you can, if you want, you can use your resources there. But I think it's much better to just build up another team that will stop a certain counter 90% of the time, instead of trying to like build up one very specific team that will increase your chances by 5%. And on offense, I don't think you should be depending on RNG. Like, if you have to go in with let's say GG stats, which we'll see here shortly are not always a great way to evaluate the reality of what's happening, since the data set is so large and they're not sorting by gear levels or speed or whatever. It is very, if you're going in offensively with the counter, it's like 50%. Either the counter works very well based upon your mods and speeds and relic levels comparatively, or you're just hoping that the RNG goes in your favor. And that's a terrible choice on offense. Terrible. It's going to be even worse with datacrons out there. You want things, you want to know that they work as often as possible. Obviously, if it's new, you don't know, you have to think about it. Or ask your friends or something. Or ask on the Grand Arena Science server. So there's that difference between offense and defense. If on defense you're trying to build a certain counter, certain units a certain way to give them a little bit more stats, yeah, you're tilting the RNG a little bit more in your favor. Okay, I still don't think it's generally worth the huge amount of resources that some people put into it. I think it's better to make your whole entire roster better, or build up another team, rather than like make one particular character just perfect. Because still, perfect doesn't mean that character is suddenly going to be 100% better. Just gives them a couple more percentage points, in most cases. So let's look at some examples and try and build up my point a little bit. So the first one we'll look at here is Bosk versus Ray. What the fuck, you might say. Yeah, this was actually a thing. So Van Seal made a video about it back in the beginning of March or something like that, I think, or even maybe February. I think it was March. And then it was popularized even more by Arnold. And then you saw, I don't know, a lot of people taking their Bosk to R9. But oh man, what a poor choice, let's just say. And this is an example of trying to make a very specific, like you have to gear him just so counter to work. It doesn't. So let's take a look. Yeah, here's like the boss team. So looking at this stats, the best results here is when it's a timeout stall team. Okay, makes sense. Two results here against this team. Not bad, not bad. But given the relatively few fights that you're seeing, and here where you see more, 12, 13, 0, 0, 25, I mean 0 here, 25%, and right here. You ask, like, what relic level are these rays? 7, 8, 9? Are they health rays? Are they offense rays? Because Ray deals a lot more damage with her 7 Whirlwind when she has offense. It's true damage. And her relic levels obviously make a difference. How fast, like how often is she going around her turn? Are these slow rays? Are they fast rays? Does this only work against a health attack ray? You don't know the answers to these questions. All you're doing is basing your, not you, whoever, is basing your huge resource spend, Relic 9, on a couple of videos that you've seen. And I think in Van Seal's video, he did show the relic levels and speeds, but it was like an R7 Ray, and there's some Gear 12 characters in the team. I mean, it's not a realistic, and all of his units were not, but they were like all R8, and I think Bosk, or maybe one other, maybe Fennec was R9. Anyway, Arnold was more like equivalent gear levels, and it only worked once, I think, for him. Started out being against Lord Vader, and then Van Seal did it against Ray, and it worked. And so people are like, woo, that's the Relic 9, my boss. No, man, what a waste. What a waste. I mean, it's cool, and it's great for content creators to get more clicks and likes and stuff, but for normal people, don't chase these little, oh, that looks cool. Like, invest in things that you know are going to work. RNG sucks. Don't try and make things perfect. Try and make everything a bit better. It's so important in GAC. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like, improve your Troopers team or your next GL or something like that, or some other team that's almost there. You know, your Bad Batch, your Night Sisters, whatever the team, Inquisitors, maybe not them. But I will. Let's also look at another. Did I stop the video? Yeah. Let's look at another example of where it's good to invest because you get a very guaranteed result. Funnily enough, that's in ships. Because there's very little RNG in ships. And you may say, oh no, but what about Han Millennium Falcon, you know? No assist, no assist, no assist, boo hoo hoo. It's infuriating, of course. Or like TIE Fighter pilot, evade, 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 evade. Yeah, it sucks. But in general, there's actually very little RNG in ships. Which sucks, honestly. I think that's the worst part of ships. Not that there's not enough RNG, but there's very little, you have very little influence in the stats of the ships. The only way you can influence the ship stats are with relic levels, gear levels. Well, also mods and skill levels of the pilots, you know, the GP of the pilots for those ships that do have pilots. But the other side of that is once you, because speed is primarily, like, the stats of the ships increase all at the same level. Everybody's ship is the same. You can't have one ship with more tenacity versus somebody else's ship. Like, if they're at a particular, if their pilots are at a particular power gear level, that ship will behave the same way or will look the same way stats wise every single time. So if you know what that is, you can predict it and you can plan around it to get a predictable outcome the majority of the time. Always there's RNG and evades and dodges and stuff like that. But generally, you're able to predict very well your combats. And this is a good place to spend gear. So let's look at Finalizer versus Executor, which honestly this fight is not actually, it was very popular for 2 seasons, I guess. But now people are placing different things like the 3 attacker executor lineups. But anyway, you can still use Finalizer against it successfully, by the way. So this, I think, pilots are a great investment in the current meta and for the meta for the past few months, and I think the meta for the future. Pilots are a great investment of resources because if you know the specific gear levels, i.e. speeds, generally in fleet, that you're aiming for, you can go to that level and know that your fleet will behave in a certain way. And the Finalizer fleet is a great example of that. So you know you need to have a Relic 6 Hux with 6 E mods, all of them, and you will be able to beat a fully maxed Executor for the 2nd reinforcement, to bring in the Special Forces TIE Fighter, to put ability block and call maybe for a stun on the enemy hounds too. So like this is a known formula that you have once your TIE Echelon is 7 stars, so it doesn't die in the opening assist. And for that, talking about the opening assist, you know you want the difference between like Relic 8, Relic 7, or Relic 7, Relic 8, and Relic 9, stats-wise, on the TIE Echelon. First Order Officer is the pilot for TIE Echelon. You can think of it as like sort of 5% RNG for each gear level. So it really depends on who calls who and how many crits the Xanadu Blood gets, whether he double taps or not. So there is RNG there, but if you have, for instance, an R9 First Order Officer, it is maybe 1 time out of 20, let's say less than that, 3% of the time, not 5% of the time, 1 out of 20, let's say 3% of the time, your TIE Echelon will die in, not necessarily never in the opening salvo, but if Razor Crest calls Xanadu Blood to assist, and Razor Crest crits, and Xanadu Blood crits twice, and then Xanadu Blood calls Razor Crest to assist, and Razor Crest crits, and Xanadu Blood crits, then you'll die. But if any of those hits are not crits, or they call Houndstooth or something like that, then you're gonna live at R9 versus R9 pilots. So the R7, R8, R9 essentially removes some RNG. I would say if you have R8, you have approximately a 10% chance of losing your TIE Echelon, which is pretty good. You can still win without the TIE Echelon. And for KRU, you want to have an R8 minimum, I think, for KRU. I really suggest an R9. He's an excellent, if you ever fight Echelons, even in arena, in fleet arena, it gives you I only climb really with Finalizer. There's less RNG a lot less RNG than Executor mirrors. But R8 to R9 gives you another like 3 to 5% RNG removal, both for survival and his KRU's hits, finishing off ships, so you don't get a second hit. And so you can see this is one of the downsides of GG. Obviously, they don't filter by gear level. I think they will at some point, but not currently. So like this top result here, this is a standard, the arena Executor lineup. Arena probably going to have 2 more fleets in there, obviously. You don't know what they're going to be, MILF and an Hawk or something. Versus the standard, and you don't even need Evan Hawke in this lineup really with Finalizer. You could just use the 2 ties most of the time. And here it's 44% win rate. But if you meet those gear levels I was just talking about, the win rate is 90 to 95%. So this is one of those cases where spending gear is a good choice because you know exactly what you're going to get in fleet. And there's a lot of value in fleet, obviously. Like, you don't like to lose your fleet combats because we're still in a fleet meta, and will be even more so in a fleet meta with datacrons. Anyway, I hope that my explanations work or that you understand them a little bit. The main point of these two themes is, well, as a player, it's important to be flexible based upon the board, especially in this past season, and not necessarily, in 3v3, I would say it's more important to be flexible based upon the board you see rather than strategizing against your opponent. 5v5, maybe a bit more strategy is valuable. And then, because I see a lot of people make that mistake, they try and strategize their opponent in 3v3, out-strategize their opponent, and they just don't have the right teams to beat the board, and they don't clear, and their opponent, through luck or strategy, beats them. And it's so bad in 3v3 where people try and get technically, like, you need a certain very precise gear level to work. It doesn't really work well in 3v3. You need to take in the counter that works, 85, 90, 95% of the time. You don't want the ones that work 50% of the time. With some exceptions, obviously, and this Finalizer versus Executor is one of the exceptions where you do know the results of spending your gear on those characters and getting certain speed thresholds. So, and yeah, it's like I was just mentioning, we'll talk about datacrons more at the end, but this flexibility is so important in the 3v3 season, and it's going to be even more so with datacrons because everybody's going to have something a little bit different. So you have to adjust depending on what you see on the board. It's going to be very, very important. Fascinating too. It's going to be awesome. We're going to look at playstyles and teams. These are things you can read. These are like general playstyles that I still see. It's the same in all of the videos. So what did I see this last season? How do I see people changing? So really, the normal playstyles, the 3 that I mentioned up here, high offense is really big in 3v3, and I think it'll be the same in the first datacron season because you just don't know what you're going to see on defense, so it's better to keep your strong units, GLs, your strong teams, GLs and such on offense, just to make sure you can clear. The fascinating thing about 3v3 is there was so many new counters. I mean, with current characters, not just new characters require new counters, but I think I personally used an average of, an average every week. I used probably between 5 and 10 totally new counters I had never used before. And, well, that includes new characters. So let's say between 3 and 5 totally new counters for existing characters that I had never used before each week. So, 1 a round or maybe 2 every round, which is so cool. Like, that's awesome. Either I would see them or I would have to figure out some setup with the opponent's defense, go look on GG, as always, so cool, and just use new things. Like, think through them and make sure that they would work. But it's amazing how often new things are being developed, and so much. Like for Qui-Gon Jinn, man, he went through quite the drama in 3v3, and Iden, amazing. Yeah, so it's very interesting. 3v3, no one checks the stats, apparently. They make so many bad choices, the first couple of weeks especially. Like, oh my goodness. Terrible things that you can see before the fight even starts. It's not going to work. Fragility of strategy. So this is like This is more related to GLs and Starkiller, to be honest. Because if you fail against a GL or Starkiller, which is the mid-level GL, EP, MJ, Starkiller, and some other ones, but EP, MJ, Starkiller is the most dangerous. If you fail, it's very hard to clean up. So if you're going in with a risky counter against a GL and it fails, maybe the end of your match right there. So that's, I think that's going to be a similar problem in the datacron season, first datacron season. So very important to be flexible once you see the board and what teams you have to use and trying new ones and not just using something that you used last time and hoping it'll work, because it's very likely not going to. Yeah, flexibility, I just talked about this. 3v3 is interesting too because there's no like territory war templates or skills to use. So, I mean, nothing wrong with templates and, do this, follow these directions for this fight or something, but none of that in 3v3. So it made for some very interesting fights. And it'll be the same in the first datacron season here, especially. So, fleet, moving on to fleet. We are still in a fleet meta, there's no question. With datacrons now, there's even less and less chance, or there's more and more, it's going to be more and more common where you can't clear, like, let's say your opponent has the JMK or the Ray datacrons, and you don't have something that can beat them. You're sort of stuck, can't clear one of the character zones. Hopefully you have an equivalent defense that they can't clear, but it's going to come down to fleet again. Making sure you can clear all of the fleet. So that's going to be, I think, increasingly important, especially because we probably have a new fleet coming. In the middle of the season, I don't think so, but maybe at the end, who knows? The Radis's fleet, it may be a couple of months too, I have no clue. Ship placement priority in the fleet Discord. Some people still don't know about this. The ship placement thing is old now. I think it's, I want to say it's like almost a year old, but there is a spreadsheet. It's in the Grand Arena Science Discord and publications a few months ago. A spreadsheet that basically shows the chances for each ship and reinforcement to be brought in depending on various variables. You really need to make sure you're putting in the right ships for different fleets. And interesting strategies being developed with fleets. Even now, there's things being changed, which I love. One of the coolest things I saw in this last season, yeah, look at Item. Item's freaking amazing. So good. So a lot of people are keeping Executor for offense. When you're using Executor on offense, unless you're mirroring, you are going to win 99.whatever% of the time. Not complicated. When you're doing that, you really don't need Houndstooth. You can just use the 3-attacker version with Slave 1 and backup, and it beats all of the same teams that the Executor lineup would normally beat. So you can use your Houndstooth, and you can move him to Radis on offense versus Malevolence. It's not exactly the same as the counter used to be, because you would use Xanadu Blood to get counterattacked to protect Houndstooth. Still works. You could use Houndstooth on defense with Radis, maybe. You have a stall-out team to counter Rebels a little bit. Or use Houndstooth in your Empire team on defense, maybe. It's a fascinating, little... Houndstooth is a great character still, but really, really cool. Lots of good info there on the GG fleet counter info. This stuff is from last month, hasn't changed really. Empire is an amazing fleet. On offense and defense, plays totally different than Chimera or Executrix. I see a lot of people taking in their Rebels, for instance, against Executrix. Like Imperial TIE Bomber, TIE Advanced, X1, and the Gauntlet Starfighter there, or Gauntlet. And they take in the Rebels like, let's go. Well, it worked great against Chimera. not the same against executrix. So keep in mind, just check the stats. Easy to make a mistake, but easier to spend 2-3 minutes, check the stats, and make sure you're not making one of those mistakes. Okay, so let's look at teams and characters. This is mostly 3v3 stuff, what happened. A lot of interesting things in 3v3. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because it's not going to be really that useful until next 3v3 season, but maybe you can keep it in mind, make some notes or something. So, first order TIE Fighter pilot. I'm curious to see how he does in 5s actually. I know people are using him or planning on using him to take out GLs. We'll see how it works. But in 3s was great. Could take out the EP, MJ, Starkiller teams reliably if your Hux was faster than Mara Jade, which is difficult. That's very difficult. Hard race to fight, and you're usually not going to win. But even if you didn't go first, you could still win. Not a hugely amazing success rate, mostly due to the RNG of who Mara Jade stuns at the beginning or targets at the beginning, and also the damage on Sith Trooper. Both of those are, and speed a little bit on Sith Trooper. Both of those are very important. So I think it's like 40% success rate on GG. But if your Sith Trooper is relicked highly, got up to about, I would say like 60%, like in real world, if you weren't using a Relic 3 First Order TIE Pilot and a Relic 5 Sith Trooper. I mean, like the bare minimum is not working against Starkiller. So, a lot of people were missing on the B team stuff. I don't know that Iden is a B team. She's sort of an A team, but Traya, Padme, the Rebels, people just were forgetting them or not using them to their fullest extent. Right? It's like people don't know who to attack. You know, here, like who to attack. Amazing. Choose any leader, choose the characters you want, and then see how it does. And obviously take that so you can see a lot more results. But yeah, a lot of people don't spend a couple minutes searching there. Iden is one of those, like, Iden's amazing on offense. She kills so much stuff, and then great cleanup as well, because she has the ability to go first. She can still be good on defense. Like, she's not a bad defensive character, but I think she's so easy to beat on defense because she doesn't have 4 troopers assisting her. Her opening salvo is mediocre, so it's pretty easy to survive with Padme, Traya, Bad Batch, Bam. I mean, you have a lot of options to kill her. Still, not easy, but much more reliable than 5, so I think she's better on offense. Oh yeah, Iden is great to kill almost all the Maul teams. Iden will chop him down. Modding was interesting. Some people still have potency modding on Iden, but like even if you put your Iden on defense and you have potency modding and your Wampa that you're using to counter Iden doesn't have any tenacity, Iden stuns Wampa, like almost never will Wampa die because you only have 2 troopers assisting. So it's, I don't know, it's just sort of like Rey. You know, people used to build an offensive Rey for 3s in particular, but now Rey is usually offensive built for TW for most bigger guilds. So there's not a huge difference. It's a more effective setup in 3s anyway for Rey. Yeah, interesting little mod changes in 3v3 that I've seen. Those are just a couple of examples. For some reason, this was strange. It gets a lot of hold, Dash, Vander, Tubok, and L3. But Bad Batch, you could like turn on auto and... No, after Tech's turn, you could probably turn on auto and kill them. It's a pretty easy fight. Bad Batch is great in 3s. They kill a lot of stuff. Yeah, make sure you use that, who to attack tool to find out what Bad Batch kills. But people, I think, were underestimating a lot, or putting them on defense. They're not a bad team on defense, but they're sort of easy to beat as well. There's some teams that beat them very reliably. I'd say easy. Inquisitors, surprisingly, I mean, also not hard to beat for like Padme, Ahsoka, but the Seven Sisters Undispellable Days, a bit tricky for a lot of teams. I've seen CLS lose against, or not CLS, Han Chewie lose against um, Inquisitors. But Thrawn Lead, for instance, is a great fight against Inquisitors because he gets so much turn meter from their debuffs. You know, the whole Thrawn Gideon tank thing works great. You don't even really need a tank, to be honest. Thrawn Gideon Vader or something like that is awesome. Anyway, lots of choices in there. Sort, or 50R-T, is a very good character. If she's modded to go really fast, and you have T3 and IG-88, you can do some huge damage with IG-88. IG-88 needs to be weakest, so he gets the whatever protection, I forget the name of it. Let's get into the weakest unit. Spark of resistance, or that's not spark of resistance, that's with rats. Anyway, another interesting thing I saw here is 50RT. Actually, I think I may have seen it with Glumit's channel with Armor and SLKR. What's that you say? How does that work? Well, if Armor is the weakest character, it gets stealth, so it can't be killed by the enemy GL. Very, very clever. It's a bit expensive, but an interesting tech. Like, you can do some cool stuff with 50RT, and I think in 5s will be even more so because they make a very dangerous offensive or high damage droid team. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see where BB-8 goes in this 5s, especially depending on which of the datacrons. And man, it's going to be an awesome season. Bam, a lot of people underestimating Bam, I think, in 3s. He's awesome on defense with Maul, shuts down a number of counters, and great on offense just to kill stuff for high banners, very durable, a lot of other things. Bam was a surprisingly powerful character in 3s, much more so than in 5s, I think. This is a funny counter that came up near the end of the season, I think week 3. Maul, Canderous, and Droideka. Any of those comps, any of the speeds, any gear levels, throw in a solo nest, not a gear 12 solo nest, probably not an R1, like I would say R5, maybe even R3. I've seen a few R3s do very well. Turn on auto and win. Very easy. So don't put this team on defense in 3s. Saw an interesting few fights with Tuskens on offense. The downside is you definitely need to have high relic Tusken Raider, and hopefully well relic other Tuskens, unless you're going up an AoE team and they're going to die. But you can do some cool stuff. They can kill some powerful teams, but you have to choose them carefully because AoE, they don't do well against AoE, and you sort of run into an issue of timing out on offense. Timing out because you don't have enough offense to kill teams with regen. A really cool team, Dash, Vander, Chewbacca, and Cat versus JMK, Cat, and Kenobi. Now, it's cool because it's reasonably reliable, assuming you have high relics on Cat, and mostly on Cat because the main risk is timeout. Decent relics on Vander, Chewbacca as well, but usually Cat is the priority target. Not all the time. Vander can die, but usually Cat's the target. Anyway, the issue is mostly timeout if Cat doesn't have enough damage. Also, Vandor does a boatload of damage himself with his special, and when Dash has the Omicron, so you keep regaining prepared. It's awesome. You can keep spamming the special. Anyway, this is a great counter. The main thing is if you're going to put your own, that leaves your JMK without Cat. So it's great if you keep your JMK for offense and you want to solo some other teams for high banners. Fantastic. But if you're one of the players who likes to put your JMK on defense, terrible choice to do without Cat because gas will just eat it up. Anyway, very interesting, cool counter. What's in the future? The future is, from a meta perspective, putting aside concerns with temporary buffs, with datacrons or with the financial, the pay to win aspect of it. Well, this game is sort of pay to win. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. We don't really know a lot of the currency, the economy part of datacrons now. But I think many people are not aware of this best mod thing. GG has implemented it a little while ago, and it's amazing. It's so cool. So it's under units. So you go to whatever unit you're in, and you click here on best mods. Mods, not mobs. Best mods. This is all generated procedurally. Like, this is not stuff. It shows for, you can choose which league you want to look at, and it shows the top 1,000 players. In this case, only 900 characters. Only 900 people have it. Or you can just look at the top 100 guilds, and you have a much wider range. Now, obviously, the stats difference here, the most popular is crit damage, crit chance. But if you go and look at Kyber, it's speed and health. So you'll see differences depending on what you look. Erodium, health, crit chance. Yeah, very interesting. But Erodium, how many people have it? 666. Oh, it's devil's number. So cool. Like Commander Sokotano, same thing. All of the characters have this. Incredibly useful tool if you're not sure what to use. Before GG also had this, but in like a much broader sense, without all this refinement and searching. So this is just like wonderful, very helpful reference. Really cool. Old Republic characters have arrived. I think we'll start getting more Old Republic characters. We'll see. They did 50 RT and then Radis, so maybe more Rogue One. Radis is an awesome character, by the way. Very cool. And he sort of, you can see now, they did the same thing with Bounty Hunters a bit, with Starkiller really well. Really, really well. And they tried with Bounty Hunters a little bit. And by that I mean, they try and make a team good in both game modes by giving the team Omicron. So Starkiller, for example, obviously Starkiller's Omicrons are just for GAC. But then they gave Mara Jade an Omicron, which makes the team better in TW for sure. Then they gave Juhani the Omicron, and my gosh, that takes the team in TW to like a whole new level. One of the best TW Omicrons. So it's nice to be able to use a team in both game modes. You know, it's not like you're stuck with a mediocre team in one game mode that you use a lot in the other. And Radis is exactly that sort of, I think not nearly as popular, but Radis is similar because Jin has a TW Omicron that fits very well with Radis. So you can use him in GAC. I mean, we'll see how popular he is in the 5v5 GAC. And you can use a team, the Rogue One team with Jin, in TW as well to do some cool stuff. So I like this vibe that they're going. I hope they do something similar with the Inquisitor faction, but probably not because they're all TW Omicron so far. Yeah, probably not with Inquisitors and Grand Inquisitor, but the theme I think is a good one. It allows you to use your characters in both game modes and gives more reason to invest in them and make them better in the long term. Yeah. Well, this is what I was talking about at the beginning. Remember that if you're in Kyber 1, for instance, or Erodium 1, or whatever division and league you're in, there's currently no reason to be in the top 10 or 100 or something versus the top 1,000. You're motivated to win battles. The more battles you win, that's where you get a lot of crystals. But if you're in that division and league that's at the top, doesn't matter top 10 or top 1,000, you get the same crystal reward on a daily basis. Obviously for pride and playing good opponents or interesting opponents or whatever, you know, if that's what you really like to be competitive and challenge yourself and play other players who are similarly skilled and motivated, then you want to be higher up. But I think it's better to have a broader roster rather than trying to focus on one. I'm jumping a little bit, but if you can do better against a wider range of players, I think you'll be better off than trying to make a counter that only works against certain team sets that certain players may place on defense. I think datacrons are going to make that even more so. A lot of the datacrons, well, let's talk about them right at the end. 3-week season, I think that's sort of cool. Every month we get 1 week off. It's nice. I can't say I feel strongly one way or another, but I like how it fits in with the other activities that are scheduled. 22nd of June, we get Inquisitor and datacrons. Oh my goodness, 50 minutes. I really like to talk. Datacrons, I think, are a wonderful addition to the game. Let's put aside the economy, financial aspects of it. From a meta perspective, from a competitiveness perspective, from a making you think to try and do cool things, to giving more variety to the game, I think datacrons are awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yes, it's going to take more time to figure out or to know what to do on certain fights, and you're going to make some mistake and go into a fight and just get demolished because you didn't read the datacron or didn't understand it or it wasn't clear or whatever. But man, it's like it gives so much flexibility to teams. Look, like this team right here, Fin Po. It could have a datacron assigned to it that gives light side characters with buffs like more damage, whatever. And every month, every season, there'll be a new set of teams that get special buffs. But the datacrons in general can apply to any teams, usually like the very low levels, just light side or dark side. So, man, there's so much flexibility. There'll be so much theory crafting. And in a way, like, while yes, on one hand, it's going to make some GL teams or very powerful teams even way super more powerful. On the other hand, not all of the GLs on defense or powerful teams on defense are going to have a datacron assigned to them, or a datacron that makes a big difference, just because you don't know which ones you're going to get. So your own teams on offense with the datacron, you might be able to take a good team, and with the datacron, it becomes an awesome team and can take out a much more higher powered enemy team, which is cool. Like, it's rewarding people for thinking and being creative. This is predicated on the fact that we assume that, let's say you do conquest and you get your datacrons. More or less, if you do conquest, everybody's going to have the same amount of datacrons, and it's going to just be RG on which ones you have, and how your rolls went, So we don't know yet this for sure. This is just an assumption, and maybe it's going to end up being terrible, and you only have to pay to get the good datacrons. I don't think so, but it's possible. But assuming that everybody roughly has the same chance to get roughly the same number of datacrons, and it's just random on which ones they get, I think it's going to be awesome. I mean, adding so much variety to the meta, I think is going to make for much healthier, more creative, more interesting. And yeah, sometimes you're going to want to throw your phone or drop your phone or whatever, swear, hit the keyboard, have a drink, depends on the content creator, but it's going to be entertaining. It's going to be entertaining to watch, definitely, as I don't really record my own videos or my own fights, so I really enjoy watching other people to learn and to be entertained, and datacrons are going to be very entertaining. So that is the end of this episode. Thank you if you actually stuck through for 54 minutes. Goodness sakes. I hope you have a good time in this upcoming season. Check out Grand Arena Buddy. I'll put a link in the I won't put a link in the description. If you want to know about Grand Arena Buddy, make a comment or come to Discord, and you'll see all the news in our Grand Arena Science Discord. And yeah, good luck with datacrons. Good luck with the upcoming GIC season. And I will talk to you next time. Stop by Discord, say hi, ask questions. Cheers.